In this episode of Hole in the Water, Captain Paul and I got to meet with Chesapeake Sailmakers in Annapolis, Maryland. Chesapeake Sailmakers is run by Chuck O'Malley, the founder and loft manager, and Bill O'Malley, the production manager. It truly is one of those unique shops that's still doing it old school handcrafting on site. We even got to see them working on the Annapolis Sailing School's fleet of Rainbow 26s for their sails. I'm actually a customer of Chesapeake Sailmakers. When I bought my 1972 Pearson 36, it had 7 sails on board. I brought them in and had Chuck's team do an analysis on those sails. He sat me down and gave me a full consultation on the sails I've got, what condition they are, what's worth keeping, what's worth fixing. He asked me questions about my sailing plans, so that he could give me advice on what I've got now, what I might need in the future. It truly was a unique experience in the industry to have such a craftsperson sit down with me and give me that type of consultation. So in this video, we go through some of my sails with Chuck, and we have a general interview with him. So I hope that you gain from this what it's like to actually work with a sailmaker that works with you on what you have from a craftsman's point of view and the knowledge base that he's got, so that it truly is a consultative experience, not just a selling experience. You know, Chuck never tried to sell me sails. We talked about what I've got, what my plans are, and what makes sense, and that truly was a great experience.
Here we are in Chesapeake Sailmakers, giving you a good introduction to what a sailmaker does and when you might need to see a sailmaker. And as you can look around in here, there's not only hundreds of sails, there's hundreds of different types of tape and sewing instruments and sewing machines. And as you probably realize, this isn't really a microphone, but Anna over here is using it to help create some of these sails for the famous Sparkman and Stevens rainbows for the Annapolis Sailing School, which is about a mile down the road here. A rigger will say to you, well, the rig, the mast and the spars, the engine of the boat, but they are of little value until they're in combination with, of course, sheets, halyards, and sails. We like to give a lot of attention to our engines, but that's auxiliary power on a sailboat. And even though most sailors may not admit it, they do motor a lot, most cruising sailors. But really what they want to do in general is sail. They want those sails up. Duh, we know that. But why is it that we tend to pay a lot more attention to our auxiliary power plants, the engine, instead of what really is the engine of your boat? It's the sails, obviously. So we want to talk about when you take care of your sails, how you ignore your sails at your own peril. What happens if you ignore sails? How long should a sail last? When should I bring a sail in for inspection? When should I replace my sail? When should I get a whole new sail, maybe a new head sail like a Reacher or a Jenica or an ASIM Spinnaker or Code Zero, which we were just talking about? When do you go in for all those things? So a sailmaker should be asking you, what kind of boat do you have? Where do you sail? What kind of sailing do you do? Are you single-handed? You know, are you strong? Are you able-bodied? Do you want things simple, easy, just for basic cruising? How many reefs will you possibly put in your sail? So all these things can come into a play when you deal with the engine of your boat, the sails, in combination with the rigging.
How long you been here, Chuck?
We've been here for 4 years. I started up in 2003, so we started down in Eastport and then moved out to this side of town 7 years ago. And so we were off of Edgewood Road and then moved here 4 years ago.
Gotcha.
This is a much better location. So let's just see what. And actually, if it has a yellow tag, the work's been done already.
Excellent.
If it has a white tag, like your Genoa, that means the work hasn't been done yet.
Gotcha.
Shall I drop it on the table?
Yep.
A number 3 Genoa. How about that?
That's the light Genoa.
I think it's an original sailbag,
There
eh?
you go.
Oh, I'm getting too old for this. Mike, how many sails were on your boat when you bought her?
More than I could handle. I think it was 7.
Seven sails?
I believe it was seven sails.
Now your boat had been set up, I think, for a lot of racing,
That's what it looked like.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, your typical 36-foot cruising sailboat probably isn't likely to have this many number of sails. So when we talked, we said, all right, Mike, get all the sails off. They're taking up a lot of room in here. There isn't enough ventilation. There's moisture in here. You want to get them out of the way. You want to be able to work inside the boat because you're doing a total rehab. Get the sails out, get the sails looked at, understand about what sails you have, what sails are worth keeping, what sails need to be repaired, restored. And then that's related to questions of spars, rigging, deck layout, etc., because you're taking an older boat from an older day when they didn't have the types of sails that we have now, and that was, as I mentioned, being used a lot for racing and cruising, and you're a cruiser, not a racer, so you had to switch things around. And again, the sails being the engine of the boat, it was very important for you to understand what are the components and what to do with them.
Basically, this is a very old Genoa. This boat would have started out life as a racing boat. All the Pearson 36 was like a pretty serious racing boat back in its day, and that's why you have so many sails on it. It's still pretty good shape. It's had either it was a hank on at one point or it had a luff curve change, because you can see the bullet holes here. So at some point, this either had a luff curve change, or maybe they converted from hank on, or they put on a new furling system, but something like that.
Chuck, do you find that when a person is evaluating a boat or taking it to survey, does the average sailor know what to look for? And related to that, does the average surveyor, if there is such a person, inspect and evaluate sails versus what you could do looking at the sails?
Generally, surveyors don't. If it has sails, they check off it has sails, and only if the thing is ripped apart and visibly failing do they say, hey, you got problems with the sails. In general, this sail, if this was up and furled and it fit the boat, they would say, okay, Genoa, check, looks like it's in no suitable condition or serviceable. But they're, unless you specifically ask them, they're not surveying sails. And I would say a majority of the surveyors really aren't equipped to survey sails.
Right.
So it's generally an area that doesn't happen a lot. So like if you were buying a powerboat, you probably would always get some kind of oil analysis done or engine survey done. With sails, this is your engine.
So if the average surveyor is not equipped to do it or doesn't do it, what does the average boater need to do? And then when does the average boater need to say, hey, Chuck, I need a sail inspection, I need a sail survey? What's involved with that?
We've had a number of people call us up before they buy, and they coordinate with their yacht broker and say, hey, I'm looking at buying this boat. Can you check out the sails for me? And we'll bring them in, stretch them out, go over the whole thing. And it's, depending upon how many sails they have, it's a, 1-2 hour ordeal. We have some yacht brokers that are better yacht brokers, and they'll say, hey, I'm putting this boat on the market and I need someone to look at the sails so I know what I'm dealing with. And so, we have a number of yacht brokers in town that will do that. And they'll say, go grab the sails, bring them in, check them over. We have some that know that the sails are in bad shape, and they counsel their client and say, your sail's really bad. You'd be better off putting a new sail on and trying to sell the boat than trying to sell it with this, because when you try and sell the boat with a sail that's going to have to be replaced more or less immediately, every new buyer is going to say, okay, this sail might really cost $3,000. They're going to say, I want to take $5,000 off the price because I'm going to have to go buy a new sail. And so it's almost always better for the person selling it. They hate to do it, but it's almost better for them to put that sail on.
Do you have experience with someone who maybe just bought a boat and comes in and says, boy, I just bought this boat and I'm looking at the sail and it looks, what's a kind of a typical customer interaction with you when someone who has just purchased a boat?
We had a customer come in a month and a half ago, and he bought a brand new to him, Beneteau 31. The Genoa had been furled backwards. So when he got on the boat, it looked like it had a UV cover, everything looked fine. And he knew the UV cover looked damaged. That's what he said. The UV cover is damaged. I need to replace the UV cover. He brought the sail in. We stretched it out, and I said, the bad news is, the good news is your UV cover is fine. The bad news is it was furled backwards, and the part that's all torn up is actually your sails, not your UV cover. And there's no way of fixing it. We had to replace his sail. But overall, I think the population sailing has gotten a little bit older, and so they may rely more on the sailmaker to fix the sail and then to put it back on the boat or install it. So some of those things, that's been a big change. The materials have gotten a lot more technical, and so there have been a lot of developments that way that, unless they've purchased sails recently, they probably aren't really aware of. And so, and not just in high-tech materials, but even in dacrons, there have been a lot of developments. So there's just a lot of material options out there, a lot of choices. And more and more we've seen, especially boats from Europe, because that's where the majority of our new boats are coming from. Most of those boats are coming in with in-mast furling. And so that's been a big thing for people to get accustomed to. And the in-mast furling systems are really effective. They work really well, but it takes a little bit different technique, and it's just kind of understanding how they work and how to furl the sail properly. So all of that's a little bit of a change. They've been around for a long time, so the systems work really well, but it's just, it might be the next boat, it might be a 45-foot boat, and it's the first time you've ever had in-mast furling. So it's an acquired taste. It's not something that you're used to dealing with right away.
Well, one thing when you come in here to see Chuck or Bill or anyone else in the shop is they know WTH they are talking about. And as much sailing as I've done, as Chuck probably thinks but won't say, is I don't know diddly about sails. And he's right, and that's why I come here. And I think that as Mike and I had talked about and filmed earlier, a heck of a lot of people with sailboats overlook their sails and overlook their rigging, forgetting that the sails and the rigging are the main propulsion of the boat, and that their auxiliary is just that, an auxiliary engine.
Well, the boat Bill was just on is a Beneteau 42. It's not that old, has an in-mast furling main. The main's completely jammed in the mast. The sail hasn't been serviced in I don't know how long. It was rotted enough that the clew block just ripped off the back of the sail in the owner, so all the webbings were sun rotted. And on top of it, he said the track on the back of the boom, where there should be a car that rides, that car is nowhere to be found. So all these little pieces, all the hardware, it needs to be there for the sails to work effectively and to make the owner's job easier sailing the boat. So,
much newer sail here, maybe?
This is a newer sail, not new, but newer. But this sail is his number 3. And so this sail has been up on the furler, and it's been furled without a UV cover. So you can see the distinct line in all the sailcloth, and that's all just UV damage.
Does that mean that the sail is actually weaker?
Sail's definitely weaker. The cloth's been compromised by the sun. If you look at the other side of the sail, you don't see any of that UV damage along here. Where when you look at the seam,
oh yeah, it's like coffee was spilled over the tea.
And that's all sun.
Years and years of the sun.
Yeah. Probably not years and years, because if it was years and years, these would all be tears.
I see.
But it was enough sun damage. But and this sail's had some work done to it, so there's sun damage here. But there's a good chance at some point this sail lived up on this furler, and it shouldn't have, because it had no cover. But as a storm sail, or like a number 3 type of sail, it's going to get put up in heavy air, and then when the heavy air passes, it'll come down. So it might not need a cover put on it, but as an owner, you need to understand, hey, there's no cover. This sail shouldn't live up there on the stay. And it was probably built with that in mind. It's not going to be used as my primary furling head sail. It's going to be used as my heavy weather sail.
And I assume that the pendant is part of that. I mean, that's actually making a smaller sail. This is not going up to the masthead then.
Right, this isn't going to the top. That pendant will hook into the top of the furler, and this isn't going to the very top. but you can see the leech has that. This whole leech has been restitched, and so basically that's all new stitching. So the original stitching in there would have been UV damaged, and it looks like they've restitched the head area as well through here.
I'm curious what the window is like. It's discolored.
Yeah, it's not bad shape.
No. What's your recommendation to Mike for his needs? On his
For his
boat?
needs, think of this as your jib, your heavy weather sail. So you get to a condition or you're making a passage and it's outside the range that you feel comfortable. You've reefed your primary furling,
25 knots maybe?
probably more like 30 knots in his boat, 35 knots. So he's got, let's say, a 135 that he can furl down to a 115% jib. That's going to carry him through a wide range with his reefs. This would be that next step. And part of the reason you'd go to something like this is your big Genoa on the furler and your mainsail or your primary working sails. So if you get into conditions above 30 knots, 35 knots, you don't want to put those at risk. So you're much better off,
Yep.
A line squall is one thing, but like sustained weather, if you're going offshore cruising, that usually gives you warning. So you have time to know, hey, we're going to get pretty bad weather here and it's going to be with us for a few days because it took a long time coming here. It's going to be with us for a long time. You can drop your head sail, get it folded up, put up something smaller, and
all in 30 knots, Mike.
No.
Cold, dark night, huh?
you do it before you get.
Well, of course.
That's what I said. The weather gives
Before.
weather gives warning. If you have a line squall,
Yeah.
it comes and it goes. That's
Yeah.
quick. But if you have serious weather coming, but this has press rings. He's got heavy buildups in the corner. He's got leech line cleats. So it's. I mean, this was at one point. This was like a good kind of racing number 3 back in the era of this boat, and it's been converted so it works on the furler already, and we know that because of the UV damage.
So, how much of a discussion do you have with Mike about where are you going? What do you like? How strong are you? What do you want to do? What kind of conditions will you go in? How much does that figure into decisions about the sail inventory?
Well, I mean, it figures into every decision. Basically how you're using the boat today, how you're going to use it 5 years from now. Most sails are going to last 10 to 15 years, with regular use. So if you're using the boat now just on the bay, going to St. Michael's and going to Oxford, you're going to get 15 years out of the sail. But if you're going to use the boat like that for the next 2 or 3 years, and then all of a sudden you're going to transition to, we're going to the Caribbean, and now we're going to go over to Bermuda, and then we're going to go to the Azores. Now you start thinking in terms of miles. And so depending upon what you build, you can be a 30,000 mile sail to a 50,000 mile sail. And some clients we have, not a lot, but a few are putting 10, 15,000 miles on a year. So, there they build a really nice sail, but after 3 or 4 years, you've got over 50,000 miles on your sails.
Sure.
So you put a lot of miles on, you're out in your boat pretty regularly. It'd take a long time to get to 50,000 miles.
Sure would.
So that's like the big difference, trying to figure out how you're using the boat now, how you're going to use it going forward, kind of what your plans are. And that helps us determine what cloth, what construction, what level of detailing, some of the features we need to build into the sail and make it more blue water versus just a bay cruising type of sail or coastal cruising. All of that comes into that initial discussion.
So as a boat owner, I'm curious at this point, what's it like for you as the professional to say, you know what, you could put X number of dollars into it, or you know what, you could just buy a new sail. And what happens when you have a conversation like that with a client?
So what we always do, and that's why we work up the estimate. So we always look at this and say, let's say a Genoa for this boat might be $3,600. So if he needs a new UV cover and he's got UV damage and he needs head webs and we've got to recut the sail, make it smaller because of the cancer at the back end. If all these things start adding up and we say, okay, you're going to spend $1,800 to make this older sail suitable to do some coastal cruising. At that point, we sit down and have a discussion about this is the cost of a new one, here's the cost to repair it. Usually if the sail I hate to have someone spend $1,800 on a sail that's 15 or 20 years old, because it's just not a good investment. Like that light number one we looked at,
Right.
we wouldn't do anything heroic there because we know that cloth is old. It's not really even made anymore, and it's just the way the seams are done. It's at some point you're going to have failure. So it's like, go out, use it in light air, don't use it in any kind of breeze, and it might give you a couple more years of service and make the boat go a little faster in light breeze.
If I were Mike at this point, and I'm guessing you've done this, we haven't really talked about it, but if I were Mike at this point, I'd be saying, you know what? For what I'm planning to do the next few years, my sales are probably okay. But when it's time to head out, like you were talking, going out to sea,
Right.
you may come back and say, well, now it's time to do X, Y, and Z.
So, and there are two things to think about there. One is, for now, you're just going to be on the bay. And so you've got this boat, you've done a lot of work, you're figuring it all out. You're going to be on the bay. Let's use what you have. And the other thing that goes right in hand with that is you're learning the boat. So you might find, you know what? The boat has a 140 and I don't need a 140. A 125 is big enough because I'm going to be shorthand sailing, and this is what I need. I want 2 reefs, I want 3 reefs.
Right.
So after you've sailed the boat a little bit, you'll figure out for your personal preferences and how you sail a boat what you need to do, and what type of sail, like what the boat's weaknesses are, what your weaknesses are, what your strengths are, and whether performance is more important to you than durability and longevity. Like, it's just figuring out all that, like balancing that equation, with your budget. So this main, this was probably the very first main for the boat. Hood sail. It's older. It probably wasn't even used a ton. It's already had some work done to it. With the
Clearly,
tapes.
clearly, immediately noticeable.
But
that
you can
it's-
see,
yeah.
like, this has been restitched, but a number of these seams, the stitching's broken down, but it's been restitched, it's been repaired. So it's a good backup main, or a good main to use on the bay. But it's an old main.
Many older sails have gotten very full and very draft aft, and as a result increases the heeling moment quite a bit.
And
They're making the boat more weather helm, so the boat's fighting harder, heeling more, leaning more on its bow, which makes it very hard to steer.
That's a very interesting point. As sails age, not only can it change the shape of the sail, but that changes your whole sailing experience.
Right.
Yeah,
It
kind
is.
of like as we age.
That's right. But the sail shape definitely changes. There's, and the older Dacrons, probably aren't as engineered as some of the newer ones. So they probably have stretched more, get deeper. This was his old main, built about, this is a hood main. That was probably the original main for the boat. So it's a boat of 73 or 74?
72.
72. So that's a 1972 main. This main was probably built in the 80s. Maybe late 80s, but you can see how certain things have changed. This has full battens. It's got batten receptacles up there. They're front loading instead of being the short battens. So it's, a little bit different headboard. It has those press rings like we talked about. These have a little bit higher tech slide, so trying to make it go up and down more easily. Lots of little things like that. This cloth is a heavier cloth than that. So it was basically started life as a heavier duty sail. Maybe they were doing more offshore cruising by this point. And this had like a foot shelf. So when these slides go into the groove in the boom, you can still keep that camber shape to the sail. And so
You call this a foot shelf?
yeah, so the shelf, see how it's got
Yeah.
a curve cut to it?
Big belly.
So when this goes into the boom, it lets the sail still get shape to it, as opposed to if these slides were put on the bottom of the sail, which a lot of cruising sails like this one, the sail comes down and it's got to get straight to get into the boom.
So that's a flavor of what it's like to get a true consultation on your sails at a loft that's full of craftsmen. When you're thinking about working with somebody on your sails, the bar is pretty high, as set by people like Chuck and Chesapeake Sailmakers. True craftsmen really understand the art of sailmaking is what you need to be working with when you want to talk to somebody about sails, and not somebody that's just in it to sell sails. These guys truly have a passion for sail making and for sailing and sailboats and the community, and it's pretty easy to see. We shot a lot of footage that day, and we can't stick it all in this video. Maybe sometime we'll add another video, because Chuck gave us a tour of the shop and showed us different tools and equipment they have. It is very interesting. I hope this was informative for you, and that it gave you kind of an understanding, if you're looking to work with somebody on sails, the types of things you should be expecting from your sailmaker.